Hello F11 members and welcome to the Fundamentals of Post-Production video tutorials for issue 53, June 2017. On the screen in front of me I have two images shot just the day before last, just down the road here in Dorset on a beautiful late spring day. And around here now the foliage is really fulsome, becoming fulsome anyways, and fresh and new, and it's prime time to be shooting infrared pictures. The clouds on that particular day were big and billowing as well, so I had fun in a field shooting this tree. Now on the screen on the left we have a picture which was shot conventionally with my standard camera, the Canon 5 DSR. I've converted it first of all from colour to black and white and then worked on it in post-production to give it that infrared type look. Whereas on the right we have the same tree shot within a few minutes of the previous image, but on a camera, my old Canon 1DS Mark II, which has been converted to be receptive to infrared light only. So it's a dedicated camera that can only be used for infrared photography. And it's very interesting looking at the two side by side. Now I know infrared photography is not everyone's cup of tea, but it is a fun thing to do now and then. And of course, you can incorporate some elements of the infrared look into your black and white photography. Some would say the image on the left, shot conventionally in colour, maybe looks a little less full on than the one on the right. It's a matter of taste, but I certainly have enjoyed shooting in infrared over the years, and I know I will occasionally continue to do so. So what I thought I'd do is work through the post-production on the two images first and see where I got to be with both of them, and you can make your mind up which you prefer. Okay, I'm just going to pause and collect my thoughts and we'll proceed. So I'm going to come out of that full screen view by hitting the tab button there. That helps if you highlight Lightroom first, and then just come back to library mode, and I'm going to start with the color image here, which was, if I go back to where I started with this picture here, I'm going to go right back to import, and this is the color image. But actually that's not the start, because as you can see down here from the designation, because this was shot at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon in mid-May, very contrasty light. So what I did was I did exposure merging. If I go back into library mode here, these 5 exposures here, these ones, have been merged using Lightroom to make this HDR image that I'm working on now. That was in response to the fact that the contrast was just too high. So that's, first of all, that was my first technique. Now we all know how to do that. We highlight the 5 images I want to merge, and then go up here to Photo, and it says Photo Merge and HDR, and I click on that and it will merge the images. We've done that in previous tutorials, so there's no need to go through that now. Suffice to say, this was my resultant merged image, untouched, but the result of merging those 5 different exposures, spanning 5 stops, I should say. So let's work now on what I did to this particular image to convert it into that black and white infrared shot. First thing I'm going to do is try and make the image as good as I can in colour before converting into black and white. So let's start with looking at the shadows. And although it's an exposure merge job there, it's still very black in the shadows, as you would expect from this contrasty light. So I'm actually going to boost my shadows by quite a bit, right up to about 70 there. Okay, that's given me a lot more detail here in the trunk of the tree, and brought out some of these shadows over here on the left as well. I'm going to pull my highlights back as well. I want some of that detail in the cloud, brightest detail in the cloud. I want to retrieve that. So I'm going to pull my highlights way back to minus 90, 95 in fact. Next thing I'm going to do is sharpen the image as I would do normally. Okay, sharpen scenic, and then add a touch of masking here. The purpose of this being to ensure I'm only sharpening the areas of the image that have discernible detail. Hold down the Alt key, move the masking slider across till the black area masks just the area of the sky, around about 15 there, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to add a touch of vibrance. Come up here. By the way, when you're working in Lightroom, you don't need to worry about what order you do these things in. It doesn't really make any difference at all. It's purely for your own sort of progression that it's important, but it makes no difference to the image because these are virtual adjustments at this stage. Okay, I'm now going to use the radial filter here I want to keep that tree there looking fairly bright, but I want to darken down the peripheral of the image a touch. So if I click on this, a radial filter lets me select an area, and I'm going to adjust this so that it's essentially just the tree really. And of course I can move this area around as I want to. Okay, move it in a touch there, and a touch here. Good. And now I just take off that shadows recovery, which is a legacy from a previous adjustment. And basically, I come down here and you see it says feather there. I want the feather to be the maximum, 100 pixels. And now I'm going to use the exposure tool here to just darken down the outside of the image. Now clearly I don't want to see a halo effect coming into effect here, but nevertheless I do want to darken down the edge of the image, in particular the clouds in the sky. So I've brought in minus 30 on the exposure, and I'll just add just a touch of contrast there. And I think that's worked pretty well. So if I click on Done now, and look at that image, it's actually made quite a reasonable colour picture that I'm happy with. So I am going to export and save that as a colour image, as is. Okay, the light's a bit harsh, but it says something. You often get these best skies at this time of the day, in the middle of the day, when there's so much convection going on in the sky. So there you go, that's the colour picture. But let's now move on to making it into a black and white image with as close as to the infrared look that we can achieve. So next thing I do is come down here, and I'm going to use Lightroom's preset here. And if I come up here, you'll see under Lightroom black and white filter presets, it has this control here, infrared. And I'm just going to select that and see how it looks. interesting. So what it's done is trying to mimic the look of infrared. And actually, if you look here, it's basically put quite a contrast tone on the image. It's pulled right back on my highlights, and it's taken clarity out of the picture. That's because that conventional infrared look, which dates from the infrared film that we used to shoot 20 years ago, had quite a soft look to it. So it's trying to mimic that. You may choose to take that out when there's no reason why we should try and mimic a film that existed 20 years ago. Nevertheless, for the moment, I'm going to keep it in there. The next thing I'm going to do, okay, you can see what the infrared preset has done here. It's boosted the yellow and the green channels to all the way to plus 100%, which is interesting. I'm actually now going to do something else as well. I'm going to pull the blue channel right back. How far? What I'm trying to do is mimic that look of infrared, which makes blue skies go virtually black. So as you can see, that has quite an effect on the blue. So I'm going to pull it all the way back to about minus 90 there. And now what I want to do, looking at the image, is the sky, to me, still looks too bright. The actual tree itself is looking pretty good, but I want to give that sky more bottle. How can I do that? Well, I'm going to use the brush stroke here, and the brush adjustment tool rather. So if I come up here and click on this, and now I'm going to make the brush tool quite big. I'm going to click on Show Selected Mask Overlay here, and also make sure that the Auto Mask Adjust button is selected. And I'm now going to paint the area that I want to darken. Okay, so as I move it around, you'll see that red is just indicating where the mask is being applied. Okay, and I've got the feather adjustment on the brush as well set to maximum. So the first thing I do is just essentially select the area that I want to adjust. And because the auto mask button is selected, it's doing a pretty good job of just selecting the area I want. By hitting the brackets, square brackets key, I can come down, make my brush much smaller now, and just paint in here, a touch here. I've gone too far really with that. When you've gone too far, you just come along, click on the erase button there, and you can paint back out the area that you don't want to affect. Really quite subtle, this. So now if I come and basically click off the mask overlay and come up here, again take that shadows off. I don't know why that's permanently set to that level, but nevertheless we're not going to lose sleep over that. And now if I pull back the exposure here, you can see it's just affecting that area of the image that I selected with my adjustment brush. Pretty flexible, isn't it? Pretty good. Now I have to be careful about going too far with this, because if I go too far you're going to get that distinctive, the sky looks full of drama, yes, but I'm starting to get a halo around the edge of the tree, and that's not a pretty sight. It's not as if I can start painting in the mask, because there's so much detail in the tree. There's these little bits where the sky shines through would give the game away. So I'm limited somewhat, but still I can continue to add the brush. If I click back on Show Mask Overlay, and click off the erase button here. I can then come back on here. I can then just, where I want to, paint in where the gaps in the tree are a bit. Let's see how this is looking. You've had to be so careful. Just take that bit out again. Okay, click that back off. And it's pretty good, isn't it? Now, looking at that, I'm just going to check my highlights there. Pull back the highlights a touch. That's just affecting still the area that I selected with my adjustment brush. And I'm pretty much there. I stand back and I think, well, what more can I do to this picture? Before I do, just going to add a bit more with the adjustment brush here. Click off the erase button, just paint in there a touch. Not bad. So there you go. Let's just click on done. I've made my adjustments there to the sky. So let's now look at where we've got with this, and I need to come back to this issue of clarity. Do I want that clarity on or off? With no clarity on, the image looks quite hard. The detail, if I zoom in, as it's shot on the, wait for that to snap in, as it's shot on the 50 megapixel 5DSR, there's amazing detail in there, of course. But I think I agree that a little bit of negative clarity helps in this case. Not maybe the full amount that Lightroom has given it, but around about -20 on the clarity slider. Just takes that hard edge off. And there I am. That's quite an interesting picture. And it's definitely got a sort of infrared type look. So that's it for part one. What we're going to do in part two is work on the dedicated infrared picture and see how I process that. See you there.